Well, a Russian spy ship patrolling the east coast of the U.S. is just simply loitering right now. I mean, it's just a mere 30 miles offshore from a Navy submarine base in Groton, Connecticut. Now, it's not unusual for the Russians, Chinese, even North Koreans to test the new administration in America. But this is what's happening with Russia lately, starting to raise some eyebrows. I want to bring in Peter Brooks, and Oren Kessler is back with us. Peter, you know, someone just tweeted me and said, oh, there's always Russian spy ships out there. It's no big deal. Should we be alarmed, and should we connect the dots between that, the apparent missiles violation, treaty violation, and even buzzing our aircraft recently?
I think there's things that are more alarming. This does happen. This is very Cold War-like. It's symbolic, but they're also doing practical things. They're trying to collect information on our submarines. I'm more alarmed by some of the other things that Russia's doing, such as the violation of the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty with this new missile, which violates a 1987 Reagan-era arms control treaty. They're also, Charles, I don't know if you know this, there was testimony last week on Capitol Hill that they're supporting the Taliban. And actually, they're holding peace talks with a number of countries that don't include the United States about the future of Afghanistan.
Russia is supporting the Taliban?
That's right. That's right. They are supporting the Taliban. Now, the support was not specified, and they said they didn't want to talk about very sensitive matters in the public, but this is going on. And of course, the Taliban is related to Al-Qaeda, and they're exactly opposite, working against U.S. interests there. They're also getting involved in Libya. They're getting involved in Hungary. Russia is doing a lot of very alarming things besides Ukraine and Syria that we already know about. So when I put those in a list there, this small intelligence collector off our coast is really way down on my level of concern. How
do you see this right now, Oren?
Well, I would agree with Peter, for the most part. Russia is doing, there's so many things that the Kremlin is now doing. It's almost hard to keep track. As you mentioned, there's, of course, the cruise missile that was deployed this week. There's the spy ship off of the coast of New England. There is, of course, the ramped up activity in Libya that Peter mentioned. I think there are a lot of analyses going around this town.
Let me ask you on that, because it seems like they're going to fill a void, right? I mean, isn't that's natural? We had 8 years of a president who drew these lines, these red lines, and didn't want to engage, and he left a void there, and they're filling that void in the Middle East and other places, right? I mean, shouldn't we have expected that, Oren?
There's certainly there's much to criticize the Obama administration's Russia policies on, to put it mildly. The reset was essentially a complete failure. I think the question now is that President Trump has said that he seeks better relations with Russia. He seeks to cooperate with Russia in fighting ISIS and so forth. And I think that's a worthy objective if it's gone about the right way, if it's gone about with the acknowledgement that Russia is not our friend, it's not our ally, it has very different values and interests. And I think we're seeing more and more folks on both sides of the aisle here in Washington encouraging the administration to just keep that in mind.
What about NATO? Mattis made comments today that pretty ominous comments to NATO that you guys got to start forking over some cash. I mean, it's they're long known not to have kept their end of the bargain up, which is par for the courses and why the euro doesn't work and the EU doesn't work and all that stuff. But Peter, it feels like he threw down the gauntlet today on them.
Well, I'm not going to call it throwing down the gauntlet. I'm not going to call it an ultimatum. I'm going to call it pressure. And I think he's given them the political realities here in Washington. Burden sharing, Charles, which is how much each, ally pays for the hosting of American forces or for defense, things like that line is way out of whack. NATO agreed in 2014 to spend 2% of their GDP on defense. There's only 5 countries out of 28, and one of those is the United States, that does that. A couple more will add to that, but the Europeans are not fulfilling their end of the bargain. So I'm not calling it pressure. I'm calling it pressure. I'm not calling it an ultimatum. And it's reasonable pressure considering how President Trump feels about burden sharing. I think
America agrees with you, by the way.
Yeah.
Real quick, we've only got 20 seconds, but both apparently Harvard is the leading candidate for NSA. Oren, you okay with that?
I think he's an excellent candidate. He's a guy who spent much of his youth in Iran. He speaks Farsi. He seems like a very serious candidate to me. And
You like him, Peter?
I've only heard good things about him, but we need to fill that job. There's a lot going on in the world, as we know, Charles.
All right, guys, you both are fantastic. Appreciate it. And at home, of course, love that you're watching. We're doing extraordinarily well. It's because of you. So make sure you watch every night, 6 p.m. now. Here's Lou Dobbs.